So I feel like I didn't like super clearly answer your questions about anxiety.
Go for it. Talk about anxiety.
I mean, it sucks.
I get all excited. Like,
Yeah,
I love when people are anxious. Yeah, I'm pretty anxious, actually, yeah.
Yeah, I know.
No, it's fair.
Wheels on Wheels with Mean Bean.
Hi, I'm Mean Bean, and this is Wheels on Wheels, a talk show about roller skating. Yes.
Red-Headed for Trouble, otherwise known as Angela, pronoun she, her, is a member of Ottawa Valley Roller Derby who skates for the Ottawa Valley Rapids and Team Ontario. She is currently serving her 4th term on the OVRD Board of Directors, is a returning captain for the Rapids, and helps coach the league's Roller Derby 101 program.
Red-Headed for Trouble, Angela, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
How did you get involved in roller skating?
The first thing I saw of roller derby was the movie Whip It. I was 13. I went to go see it in theater. I think it was a year later. My sibling's friend at university in St. John was playing a roller derby game, so my family went to watch. And then next fall, Fredericton, my hometown, had its first 101 program. So my older sibling, me, and my father joined. So that's how I got involved.
So your parents were always supportive?
Yeah. Yeah, my mother was hesitant at the start, but I mean, she's like my biggest fan now.
So were you sporty before?
I wouldn't say I was super sporty. I did Irish dance competitively for a few years. So I did dance from 8 till 16. And then the last year, I kind of used it just as like cross training for derby because it was just a very different vibe. And, you know, once I got into the derby space, that was so much more fulfilling and confidence building than like teen girl in dance. Not speaking for everyone's experience, but can be complex and not always as wholesome as derby, or like can be a bit cliquey. I did soccer when I was like 4, track, but I was too anxious to do team sports. I tried out for volleyball once and I hurt my arms too much and I cried.
As a teenager, what was roller derby like for you?
Doing something so unique that no one else I knew at my age was doing. It made me feel special. And it was just so wonderful. It was me and then another 14-year-old, and we were the only minors in the league. We didn't have a juniors program. We were kind of gradually brought up through where we could only do contact with certain members of the league, like the coaches, and then they eventually changed the bylaws and made it so that we could like do full contact. And then I think my first game was when I was 17, and teams were required to sign a waiver when they were playing against me. But yeah, so it was just me and another person. And we were obviously like the babies of the league, but it was really nice. It was like all this wonderful supportive group of role models that were so different from me and like what I had kind of growing up. Everyone's different in roller derby, as you know, but we had lawyers and crown prosecutors and nurses, and then like just really cool tatted badasses. I'm just like a shy 14-year-old, and they're all so sweet to me. Most people are old enough to be like mother, so I was just like this lovely surrounding of these older sibling or mother figures that were bringing me up. And yeah, it was a really, really amazing experience. Yeah. Capital City Rollers.
Oh,
that was
nice.
my first league.
Did you find that environment much different than what you were dealing with in high school? Was high school kind of miserable?
High school was pretty miserable. Looking back, like, I don't know how I did it. And I guess that's like when you're in it, you don't realize. But I was like sleep deprived the entire time. I was realizing now I'm very depressed. I put a lot of pressure on myself for grades and stuff, even though they do not matter. It was just hard to manage it all. And I had a pretty good, considering like high school life, I had a good group of friends and everything, but I was just so busy. I was so stressed out, and like anxiety that I didn't realize I had. Now I know it's like a thing. But you could not pay me enough to do high school again.
You anxious to do team sports, which is interesting because I feel like roller derby is the teamiest of team sports.
It is. Yeah, we love each other.
Yeah. What helped with the anxiety?
I think partly because it was so gradual for me. So I was raised through derby. It built my confidence in that space. And then also there's something very special about the derby community. Very inclusive. For me, one of the main things was I hadn't seen people with all different types of body shapes and sizes be athletic and succeed in sport. So as a teen girl, that was extremely impactful, and I can't explain how huge that was for me. And instead of focusing on different physical attributes or aesthetic, being like, okay, well, I'm really strong or I am good at this thing on the track, maybe helped by my body type or what have you. And just seeing that people of all different body types had a role to play in this sport and weren't ostracized for it. It was just such a wonderful, welcoming space. And then it was a couple years before I played a game, and it just made me feel really strong and powerful. My last game with my home league, they made me do the last jam, and I was just like sobbing. I was jamming and just like crying, and then there's all these pictures of me like hugging my opponents who were like also people that I knew for multiple years who also kind of raised me too. And like, so there's pictures of me with people from like the Harbor Grudges from Halifax of me just like
Sweet.
yeah, it was so hard to leave them.
And then you came to Ottawa?
Yeah, so I grew up in Fredericton, New Brunswick, and then I moved to Ottawa for university. I did human rights with a minor in sexuality studies at Carleton, and I joined what was then RVRG, Rideau Valley Roller Girls, right when I moved here. I took a month to adjust. And yeah, and then I've been with RVRG, then OVRD, a lot of league shifts, but I've been in Ottawa playing roller derby since.
You played for Rideau Valley Roller Girls?
Yes, yeah. So they were the ones that had the Vixens, and then they rebranded to Rideau Valley Roller Derby, and that rebrand was like a year or two, I think, before the merge between CCDD and RVRD, which merged into OVRD. Very confusing. First I was on the Sirens with RVRG, which is their B team. For a while there, I was on Slaughter Squad, the A team, and the B team and House League teams.
At once?
Yeah.
Wow.
So there was practice Tuesday night, Friday night, Saturday morning for 2 hours B team, 2 hours A team. And then we also had Saturday night practices.
Wow.
Yeah. I didn't party a lot in university. I'd like get back from practices and my friends were like already done drinking. And I'm like, okay.
What kind of university students are those?
Yeah, they peaked early in the evening. When RVRG had a men's team, which was like half men.
Was that Slaughter Squad?
Mm-hmm. We played a tournament in Rome, New York that has the biggest point spread that I've experienced. I can't remember if we made double digits. It was like maybe around 10 to like 600. And then before the merger, I was development on the A team. I played like a couple jams that season with them. Really good experience. I got to practice with them. Anxiety inducing for sure. But I realized around that time that roller derby really helps with my anxiety. I used to jam a lot. I used to primarily be a jammer, which was kind of before blockers got better. Well, because when I started, derby was completely different, right? Where it was 2 start whistles and just like 4 walls, and I was like fast and little, so I could just move around people. But now look at our walls, where it's like, okay, shit. I also have to be strong and smart. Okay.
Which you are. I mean.
Thank you. Yeah, so I jammed and blocked, and I liked to do like both in one game, which was probably a pain in the ass for the coaches to figure out the lines. Especially with jamming, I found that because it was like fight or flight for me, I didn't have time to be anxious.
Fair.
Or time to like overthink things. It was just like go and survive. And it was like a healthy outlet to do something very intense and get your heart rate up in a way that's enjoyable and fun. That's not a panic attack or something. But I did have sometimes panic attacks before games, and not necessarily being worried about how the game would go, just the anticipation. And I think more so when I started like captaining, the pressure and stress of it.
I think the reason why I love being in a tripod so much is I have like that herd mentality of like a pack animal.
Yeah,
I feel safe. Yeah, safe. I feel safe with my buddies.
Well, that's what was nice about when I was on the A team pre-pandemic. Was development. There's all these like really incredible, strong, just really incredible players. And it was basically when I'd go on, my job was to stick with my brace, basically, one person. I'm like, okay, you can shepherd me along, feel safe with you, and it's okay. So I understand that. Also, like in mixed level practices or like scrimmages, I like to try to be that person for other people.
You're so calm.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love it. And it's just like, okay, find Red.
Yeah.
Red's nice and calm.
It took a while for me to build up my communication skills on the track because I found people would get really frantic. So my motto is kind of cool, calm, collected. That's how we're trying to be out there, trying to communicate. I don't know if I would describe myself as competitive. I like winning because it's fun, and I like trying hard because it's fun, but it's not like, I'm not going to get upset if we don't win or if something doesn't like go my way like that. Coming from a very small league in Fredericton, New Brunswick, we weren't, as far as I know, super competitive, and coming to our VRG was really intimidating for me. The first practice was actually a Friday scrimmage that I came to, and one of my first memories is I was bracing wrong because I can't remember how my leg did it before, and I got yelled at. Which, like, on the track, like, you yell when you're communicating, and it's like just a scared little 18-year-old. So it was an adjustment just in terms of styles of play, because with a more skilled league, then there's going to be different like formations or different strategies that you can do, and there's more things that are at your disposal. So that was, an interesting transition. It was like fine. I didn't find it to be like too stressful or anything. Even between leagues, there's like differences in how people do things.
So Rideau Valley Roller Girls, and then there were mergers. You've been with the league for a long time through a lot of transitions. How do you feel like the culture has changed through that time period?
I think I missed a lot of drama or vibes because I was so little. I was 18 when I joined our VRG.
Okay.
And there was other people like around my age too, but I was just really aloof and like not involved in any of it until more recently of like being on the board. I'm like, I don't know what is going on in the league at all. Like, it's none of my business. But I knew that there was issues in the competitive teams. But I think, like with any group of people or any competitive sport especially, like, there's personality clashes. Yeah. It's intense. It's like brings out a lot of different emotions in people, and that can be good and bad, or like neutral is just how you manage them. OVRD, we've worked really, really hard to rebuild and have a culture that's trying to make sure everyone's included and consulted. Not to say that that always happens, but it's a much more positive culture. Yeah, I didn't have any issues with how the league was before, personally.
When you came to know that you were queer, did that help in any way, being part of Derby?
It definitely helped me realize I was queer.
Fair.
You have all these like hot queer people around you, So like it didn't hurt. I remember, oh my god, and this is funny. Where like, how didn't my parents know? In high school, growing up, I had pictures on my wall or whatever of like different celebrities, and I had one of someone who was a very popular skater at the time, who's like super jacked and beefy, just like on my wall. It was up on my wall in university too, and I was like, I'm just a really good ally.
Can you say who it is?
Smack Daddy. Gotta look
Shout
him
out
up.
Smack Daddy. I would love to try and find a photo.
Here, let me find a photo right now.
You have one?
No, I don't have one. I'll look it up. it's currently my background photo.
Definitely gonna have to put that on the screen.
No. Surprised when you look up Smack Daddy, you don't get a hot roller derby player. But it wasn't just them. There was other people that like I was like a fangirl of. I think I'm a late bloomer. Even when I realized or came to terms with being queer, it was multiple years before I came out. And one of my best friends, when we were like newly friends, we were in the same course at Carleton together. I told him like, oh yeah, I'm not out. And he was like, you play roller derby and you have a side shave. Like, you're out. I was like, fair enough, I guess. It definitely helped me come to term with my sexuality because I couldn't like ignore it. Mm-hmm. I also had a crush on a TA I had first year, okay. And I was like, this is a real person, not a celebrity in like a movie, Elliot Page. So then I was like, well, these are real people in my life that I'm interacting with on a weekly basis. Shit.
So you started in 2011,
yeah,
14 years ago when you were 14. So you've been doing roller derby for half your life.
Yeah, it's almost my 14th anniversary in October this year. When we had the lockdowns and suddenly I was without derby, I was like, this is my identity. This is my outlet.
How did you cope?
Poorly. I mean, how did any of us cope?
Fair.
I didn't put on skates for a really long time until Sarah, Daisy, was like, hey, I want to learn how to skate. Take me outside. Because I was like, it's too sad. I miss my friends. I miss traveling. That was really big shock for a lot of us in the derby community because it's a support system. It's your community. For so many people, it's a main social outlet. So there's a lot of grief. And then some people couldn't return to derby because of disability or it being too high risk. So very understandable and upsetting that that's the case and that the sport isn't accessible to them anymore.
So we are wearing masks. Are we so cute?
For me, it's important to wear a mask at Derby. I'm personally more comfortable around people masking. Not everyone can wear a mask, and a lot of people can't for various reasons, but I think that for me personally, those of us who can should, to make the space more accessible to those who wouldn't be able to do it or feel like it's less accessible to them. And I don't see myself not masking at practices or games until we don't have COVID or RSV. Like, pandemics are so closely related with climate change, which is so closely related to environmental racism. Intersectional, right? And for me, I see that there's a lot of disabled people, various different types of disabilities, asking people who can to mask. And because I can, I mean, it's not ideal sometimes, but it's pretty low effort for me personally. Not that if it's not low effort that people shouldn't do it, but I'm used to it. I don't put the blame on individuals at all for a pandemic or for COVID being a thing still, but we have been let down by our governments. And so it's understandable that people do think that COVID is over, but it's definitely not. And I do not want to get long COVID and not be able to play Derby. It would be nice to not have to worry about this. Like, it's very stressful. There's a connection too for queer history of governments deciding that certain illnesses or pandemics aren't a big deal, and then we lose a generation. Personally, masking is also kind of flagging. And not that this is the only way that you can show people you care. I am doing it because I don't want to put people at unnecessary risk. I also personally like to wear a mask in public. It makes me less anxious. I have sensory issues too, which is the reason some people might not mask, but for me it's kind of sometimes like a nice hug, and I don't need to worry about what my face is doing. I think I smile too much sometimes too, so I'm like, I can be meaner looking in public with a mask.
I don't think I've ever seen you look mean, but...
Okay, you could lie and tell me I do.
Sure.
Look mean and tough.
Okay, yes, you look very mean and tough. So anxiety.
Anxiety.
You realized you had an anxiety when you were older. You're medicated now.
Yeah, because during the lockdowns, I was having regular like panic episodes, multiple days of like me just like clenching my jaw so hard because I felt if I didn't, I would just fall apart. Getting so anxious, I'd work myself up into a panic attack where I'd like, throw up until my eyes were bloodshot and I'd get burst blood vessels that looked like freckles on my face and shit. Just like,
so horrible.
but I also wasn't out to my family. Like, it's that
okay.
recent. I came out to my family like 2021. I'd already been dating Sarah for several months, which is like, it's hard to be in a society.
Yeah.
Even though I was raised in a really supportive environment and like liberal, because I don't like to be the center of attention. So it's like, point being about anxiety and Derby is that it helped my anxiety to have an outlet, and you know, was a space where all my faculties were already used up on other things, so I couldn't fall into anxiety when I'm on the track. You know, before or after is a different thing, but generally after, like the endorphins, like you're good.
You eventually got into leadership positions.
Yeah, 2021, I served my first term on the board of directors, and that was basically because they were like, okay, we need people to join or else the league will dissolve. So I was like, I guess I'm joining. But I didn't feel like confident or like capable, and I was also in school and like so really at capacity and also mentally ill, coming to terms with my sexuality and stuff. There's a lot going on. It's interesting because people would always describe me as being chill, and I'm like, I'm extremely anxious, but we're medicated. I've developed a lot more like confidence over the past couple years of being like forced to be in leadership position. I mean, I'm still a very anxious person. It's just not on the track because I don't have the capacity to think anxious thoughts on the track.
Sure.
It's full of other stuff.
And you know what you're doing.
Well, I'm lost a lot of the time still. It's always going to be chaotic. That's something that people who are new to Derby like really struggle with, of being like, I'm so lost, I don't know what I'm doing. And it's like, yeah, that goes away slowly, but like for most people it's still going to be there, like sometimes.
In Daisy's interview, Daisy talked about how you talk them off the ledge a lot.
And I also think it really helps to have a partner like Angela who is so experienced and advanced, because when I start get into that negative self-talk or start doing those really definitive statements of it went like this because of this, and Angela's like, no, that's not how it happened, I can't be like, well, what would you know? Because she's been skating since she was 14 and she plays for Team Ontario. So like, what would I know? Who the fuck am I to be like, I could possibly know more than Angela?
Hey, you're actually being stupid right now. I love you so much, but like, does that be a ridiculous expectation you're putting on yourself? Or this was not your fault. This kind of thing just happens. This doesn't mean that you're like an unsafe skater or a bad skater or whatever. Like, a lot of people struggle with feeling really hard on themselves at derby. People really struggle with the mental game of derby, and I have. My mental game did get a bit rough returning after the lockdowns because my body changed, my physical fitness changed. I felt like I was at my peak, and I'm like, can I even get back there? I've lost so much skill and endurance. Again, I guess grief about where I was before, not ideal. A reason why I don't jam anymore, and my explosive like power is not up to par with jamming of today, but also because our blockers are fucking incredible. I don't want to jam against Katie and Harding and all these people. Like, what? No. Body issues, which I didn't have as much as I think a typical teenage girl did at the time because of derby. But then I didn't have derby for a while, and I was like, I felt strong and powerful when I'm playing derby, and then I wasn't playing derby and my body changed. And then I took the body changes to mean that I'm not as strong. I started learning more about fat phobia, and I was noticing I had thought patterns that I had never had before that were typical. Most people have probably had, but I didn't necessarily have them because I think in large part because of me being in derby in critical teenage years. It is so a struggle sometimes to exist in a body. In the first year or two of coming back to practice, I was like, I don't even know if I want to play competitively. Like, I'm just happy to be able to be here. I want to be skating until I physically can't.
Were you setting your expectations lower because of those changes?
Yeah, I think so. I didn't know what competitive play would really look like, what it would look like for me, what it would look like for the league. A lot of people who were on the high-level teams within the league didn't come back or retired during the lockdowns. So there's a strange gap in the league right now because of the lost years, where we have people who have been playing for years and years or started a bit before COVID, but then lost that time of growth. So there's a very wide range of skills in the league right now, which is wonderful. It was hard for me when I came back to playing to be like, am I where I am in terms of perceived skill level, like, because a lot of the really good or better players dropped out. And to measure your success when the league and derby is so different, it's still hard to try to measure what my progress personally looks like. Though now I do have more of a baseline of having played a season.
Playing on Team Ontario.
Yeah, that can help. The highest level skaters in city leagues and provincial leagues too, a lot of people dropped out. But I mean, it's whatever. Does it really matter? No.
It's almost like you don't want to recognize your success.
Maybe. Because I started so young, I feel like I should be better than I am. Brains can be mean. We're all just doing our best with what we have, and we're all trying to manage lives.
You did come back from the pandemic, and you came back from your body changing and having 2 years off, and all of these subsequent successes came after.
You know, you've got a great point.
So how did the Team Ontario thing come to be?
There was people in our league who were on Team Ontario before, and a bunch of us just went to the tryouts, and I didn't expect to make it. It's a good experience to try out and get feedback maybe and travel to play some derby. So I was very surprised when I got the offer, and it was tricky because I don't drive or have a car, so I almost didn't accept because I was like, I'm not going to be able to make it at any practices anyways. But I'm glad I accepted, and it was really fun last year. We played the tournament in Calgary and in Michigan. It was a really good experience, really fun. And it's fun to be part of different teams as your skill develops, where you become back to the bottom on another team. Like when you're in middle school and then you go to high school and you're like, man. But in my opinion, that's how you learn and grow, is working with people who are more skilled than you or more experienced. And yeah, it was just really fun.
Playing higher level games, did you just treat them as you would a regular game?
I go into games very lighthearted. I don't take them super seriously. So I was worried about that, being on the provincial team. If everyone around me is taking it super seriously, how is that going to impact my headspace? But in my experience, most people were like, you know, just really excited to play roller derby and really nice. Yeah, I was worried that my personality wouldn't fit in with the team, or just general new to a group feelings. My first Team Ontario game was in Montreal against the Sexpos, which was intimidating. But the second game in that doubleheader was against the Skids. But I was like, this is my first game. I don't want to overextend myself and, God forbid, break something. So I watched from the sidelines and was pleased with my decision. And then Luna was in that game, and she got a lead.
Wow.
It was very exciting to watch that. Luna. Yeah.
There's been a few VRD skaters on Team Ontario. That must have helped too.
Yeah, it definitely helped that last season, Team Ontario, Katie and Harding, and then Writer's Block and Kylie were on Team Ontario. So we'd carpool, and that helped. And then, for those of us, it was our first season with the team, then we were at least in it together, and we're, I guess, all nervous. And then also having a couple practices I went to with Katie, my emotional support Katie.
Do you feel like you're ever going to aspire to even higher levels of play?
I'd love to, honestly. Yeah, we'll see where it goes. It's strange because I don't feel super competitive. I'm not a very goal-oriented person. The thing that I'm most intense about in my life in this way is derby, and even then, I don't think people would describe me as intense on the track or anything, so I just really like it, and I like to play challenging games. I like to play high-level derby, so I would love to, if possible, one day play at a higher level. We'll see.
I have to ask you about the light-up wheels.
Oh, well, they're just from Rito Rollers. I just like them. I'm not a gear maintenance guy. I don't take care of my gear as much as I should. Pre-pandemic, I wouldn't ever change my wheels. Kind of no matter where we were playing, I would just adjust
That's such
to
a
the
flex.
floor. I wouldn't even know what type of wheels I'm skating on. I'm like, I have no idea what hardness this is. I don't know what I'm doing. And I feel like it was a lot of just out of convenience. It's easier to adjust than bother with buying new ones and learning what the different hardnesses mean. But now I do. I've twisted my ankle too many times, but I usually just go between a really hard wheel or a really soft wheel. Yeah, the light up wheels I use are 88. Alex, don't come after me. But they're outdoor wheels. I skate with them at Pride and then on slippery floors. One thing I was like pretty anxious about though, playing with Team Ontario, was I'm like, these are just the wheels I have. People don't know me. I don't want people to think that I'm attention seeking or like which is so silly. I'm like, I don't want people to think that I'm like a show off and think I'm better than other people because I have these sick light up wheels. I can't remember if I changed them for my first game or not, but I was like, seriously considering it. They're bright, they're fun. Kids love them. Term on the board was 2021, and I've just stayed on the board. I don't think there's ever been anyone else who has put their name in for external comms, so I'm like, can keep doing it until I A, burn out, or B, someone else wants to come do it.
So not because you love external comms.
No.
Just because nobody else was doing it. Wow.
Yeah, but I mean, I like doing the Instagram. And I like being in a leadership position in the league now. Not specifically external comms, but to have my voice heard and like be able to impact the culture of the league moving forward. So I'm really glad that I was able to be in a leadership role with the other people who were throughout these past 3, now 4 seasons, to like recreate the league in a way that I think is more welcoming and just be more intentional about the inclusion and the vibes at practice and stuff.
And I kept hearing OVRD is competitive.
We are the competitive league because we have the capacity to play like competitively, right? But that doesn't mean that we don't have non-competitive play, or that everyone needs to have like a really competitive spirit to like be welcome in the league.
Being like the social media person, that's a platform to raise awareness for various things that are happening in the world.
For me, roller derby is and should be such a inclusive and intersectional space that, at least in the derby that I've seen and been a part of, is still, for example, like very white. And roller skating and roller derby did not have white origins, as with many beloved things in our culture. Yeah, I just think that because of the values of the community of roller derby, there is often an overarching shared value of inclusion and, for example, like trans rights. And it is, in my opinion, everyone's job to speak up about these things. Public relations and speaking out against different issues from the point of an organization is nuanced and complex. But to me and a lot of people, roller derby isn't just a valueless thing. It does have generally common values, and as a sport is so trans inclusive and actively trying to be decolonized, it's just so important for people who have a platform to speak out on things that impact their community. And my personal values don't reflect one-to-one the whole league's values, right? But my first action as a member of the board was to do a statement about the convoy.
A lot of leagues have been coming out on social media saying, we support trans rights.
The derby is run by the skaters for the skaters. So we're in a very unique position to create the spaces that we want. We have that power. Something that the board did a couple seasons ago. And we really wanted to do what we could to action some of the calls to action in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And, looking at leagues in Canada, they, in my experience, very queer. Our league's very queer queer, very trans, very white, and saying, okay, why is it this way? And how can we try to diversify? How do we diversify to make this sport a space where anyone can feel comfortable in? And it's hard to feel comfortable joining a community if you don't feel yourself reflected in it. So then how do we start getting people to feel comfortable? And it's so valid if people don't. So for like Indigenous engagement, we have a few things in place that we still need to work on more, but you can opt into having a bursary for the 101 program if you're Indigenous. And our financial assistance program, we don't want there to be any barriers that we could and have the power to remove to be in the way of people accessing this wonderful community, which is why financial assistance is so important to us, and doing what we can, and we still have a lot of work to do, but to try to lessen the barriers that exist. What I'm sharing on Instagram and stuff has pissed people off before. People were not liking the Palestine post. Majority of people were. There's conversations of, okay, do we post this because backlash? I'm like, well, if we're saying we want to be inclusive, then we need to show that. And it is tricky though. And now, like, I'm not the only media person either, right? We have a media committee. Because before it was like just my thing.
Right.
I was like,
oh, that's intense.
An evil like mastermind of like my gay agenda on Instagram. But people love the gay agenda. Yeah,
Even as a straight person, I love the gay agenda.
You have to.
Like,
that's mandatory. For you're in Derby, you've signed the gay agenda.
yeah.
Well, and there's so many of these things that are like political or like controversial topics that really shouldn't be, and they are values of Derby, or what Derby, in my opinion, should be. And everyone's going to have a different relationship to Derby and what they want Derby to look like. But, you know, like with trans people in sports, I've been skating with trans people for over a decade, been in changing rooms with trans people. Like, it's not a problem. As a cis woman in a very physical sport, you don't know what you're talking about. And so Derby is political. Like, I mean, everything's political, in my opinion. People get up in arms about, like, oh, why are you making this political when we're not making things political? It's a privilege if you don't think that certain things are or should be political.
Right, and then until it affects you.
Exactly, yeah. And that's the thing where it's like, okay, for example, Palestine, like, doesn't necessarily impact our league directly, but the fact that it doesn't also highlights a problem, because that means, okay, it's not impacting our membership directly. I mean, it could be, and it's impacted so many of us, like, deeply, but I don't have people I know directly affected by it, right? But that's also, it's reflective of what the league looks like. If we don't find this is an issue to the league, then why shouldn't it be? Whether it be about Indigenous rights and access to sport, or Palestine, or trans people, Derby to me is very political. It's a resistance too. Like, it's what we're seeing, especially right now. The essence of Derby is queer, is trans. Yeah, Derby's been, you know, as I said, such a huge, important thing in my life. It's like I have it to thank for most things in my life, and I've had such a positive experience, and it's given me so much confidence and joy and self-assurance and growth. I want to try to do my best to make sure that other people can have that, which is why I'm happy to like captain, and I just really want to foster that space for other people. And it hurts if I think about people not getting that experience, you know, and of course not everyone can, and everyone comes to sport in different headspaces and with different perspectives, but just knowing the immense positive impact it had on me, I know what it can do, and I want it to do that for other people too. I feel grateful and indebted to roller skating, roller derby specifically. I feel like raised by roller skating, the community, and so much of who I am today is inextricable, in my opinion, from roller derby.
Nice job.
Trying not to fall is so much fun. Feels on wheels.